Hey there, White Sox fans. Oh, as promised, Dugout Metrics is not just back, it's back and coming hard. This is unprecedented. Two programs in 1 week. Like, I think in back-to-back days, this is nuts. It's a pace that I'm afraid we might not be able to keep up, but who knows? I mean, we could go 3 days in a row, 4 days in a row, whatever. All right, and let's, there was a lot of intrigue last podcast. We started off with the breaking news that that Dugout Metrics had traded Luke Smailes away in order to get some pitching help, which was Malachi Hayes. And then, of course, during the course of the podcast, it ran a while. It was, like an hour. And again, I'm always multitasking here at Southside Sox Central. I was working the phones, I was working the text with Luke to try to get him right back. Not quite a sign and trade. It's a very complicated situation. I can't really play it all out here just on the podcast. But the good news was, we got him back. We signed him back up. He was holding out a little bit. He's gone a little big time. So, I had to up the offer and all that, but that's fine. We got him back. Here's the wrinkle to it, though. And again, we're continuing to negotiate. I mean, he's looking, very happy, very polite right now, but the negotiation continues because you'll notice this is like a dugout metric. It's just Luke Smailes. So in coming back, I'm not saying he's hi-hatting us. I'm not saying he's prima donna, but he said, hey, first one back, it's just got to be me. And I said, all right, Luke, I got to get you back. So come on, it's just you and me, no sweat. Of course, I am just making light, but Luke is back with us, and I'm sure we will have a group again. We have added Malachi sort of to our little Dugout Metrics group, a very popular podcast we've had. Somehow went a couple years without having one, but we're back, and we're going back-to-back days. So Luke, after the protracted negotiations, I was sweating. I don't know, you were in the driver's seat. I was sweating, but hey, we got you back, and it's very nice to talk to you again.
Yeah, I'm happy to be back. You forgot I had a no trade clause that I exercised, so you tried to move me, but I pulled an Eduardo Rodriguez and I'm back. Decided not to move.
Right? Yeah, because there's so many better places than Southside Sox to be at. So yeah, I'm sure you looked at it like, yeah, I don't want to go. Yeah, why would I go to the Dodgers?
Well, it's good. It is good to be back, though. I know the last year and a half, sometimes it's not so inspiring to get on and talk about this team all the time. So, but they've got some pretty intriguing draft picks, and the last two drafts look like they've, at least so far, shaping up pretty well. So hopefully we'll have somewhat of a farm system to talk about, especially with the trades that happened this past couple of weeks and also the draft in the last month.
Yeah, I would say, Luke, you picked a pretty decent chunk of, let's say, like 18 months to miss, really. I mean, frankly, you came back a little too soon, but I appreciate that you're here. Everyone's aware at this point. Luke's done a 3-part a series where he's done definitely a couple really in-depth articles focusing on the college draft picks, which really was the bulk of the draft for the White Sox. Those are linked here in this podcast post, but you've already read them. You don't need to look at it. I mean, certainly look at them again, but you're already familiar with what he's had to say and some of the optimism that he's bringing and mining down and getting into, that's what Dugout Metrics is, right? We're getting into the numbers. They're sort of lying underneath these guys. So we're not just making knee-jerk reactions like I do, because that's what I do. I don't have the numbers. My brain doesn't function, so I can go, oh, hey, yeah, that number and that number, this is making a lot of sense to me. And so even on this podcast, Luke is going to explain some of this to me, why maybe I should be a little bit more excited about some of the guys picked out. Now, listen, Lord knows Southside Sox doesn't have access, but, Luke was on the field at the draft. He was supporting the whole draft process. So, I mean, we're talking about, I can't claim him, but we, by some sort of osmosis or just good luck, we've got someone who's really, really close to the process and put some of the expertise that got him there in that position in the first place now into these articles for us on Southside Sox, and they've been really great. So thank you, Luke, and we're going to jump right into it. We're not going to just go, come on, it's too boring, even though you're going to undermine me by picking the first round guy. But we're not just going to be boring and go like 1 through 20 or something. So the first thing I'm going to throw at you, the first thing I want to know is what you felt the best pick of the draft was for the White Sox.
Well, I won't pick González as the first round. I do like the pick. At the time, I think he was my third favorite selection in that pick. I really like Chase Davis, the outfielder from Arizona, and also Garrett Taylor, the third baseman from TCU. that ended up going shortly after the Sox pick at 15. But I did like González. I think 3-year track record of performance at SEC is nothing to shy away from. It's really impressive. Good shot to stick at shortstop. He's a left-handed hitter, which we know we need. And so they've stockpiled a few of those as well. But really, I think my favorite pick in the draft, I really like the 3rd-round pick, Seth Keener from Wake Forest.
Ooh,
and I think part of it is, one, you're just coming from the pitching machine that is Wake Forest that got them all the way to Omaha. They have a well-known that the pitching lab they do there, it's highly data-driven, analytically driven.
Ooh.
But one thing that they did with Keener was he got hit pretty hard in 2022. And what they did is they realized that his slider was a really good pitch. So they're like, hey, let's just throw that a lot more. And that's what they did. And he ended up having huge strikeout rates. He struck out almost 40% of the hitters he faced. And he's picked, and you're like, well, he only started like 8 or so of his 20 appearances. And you're like, oh, they're drafting a reliever in the 3rd round, which maybe that's his ultimate fate, but I'm sure they're going to bring him on as a starter. But I think with Keener, you look and you're like, he pitched at Wake Forest. It's just a different situation there. They had so many good arms to choose from that were all really good. And so I think it's a good sign that they're buying into this type of pitcher that is maybe a little bit unorthodox of the classic, pitch usage. And he's going to throw a lot of sliders. And if he clicks, it's a starter with really high octane stuff. If it doesn't, maybe it's a back end reliever. So leaving yourself open for a couple different options is something I like they did there.
Now, what you lay out there, because on the face of it, it's like, okay, it does deflate the room a little bit. It's like you do want to be able to, for better or worse, you do want to be able to label these guys, especially when you're really talking about at the top of the draft. And it's hard and it's elusive, which is why it's great to be talking about this and reading your article, because it gives us a little bit more of the background that might have detailed the process of the White Sox making the selection. In your piece, you're talking about how his fastball really isn't something that's terribly impressive. I think you're even calling it, you got to get out of the dead zone. Right. And that implies that, whatever the White Sox want to do with him, it implies that they're confident they're going to be able to. Do you have that same faith? Have we seen anything recently, even in maybe the most recent 2022 draft, have we seen anything that might indicate that the White Sox aren't just, wanting to do that, but are beginning to prove that they can do that with guys? Because we've had a pretty good amount of disappointing news with some arms, not necessarily from the very recent drafts. So, it's one thing to say, hey, they know what they got to do, but are we confident that, there's a shot at them actually being able to do that with Seth?
Yeah, I think they can. And I think that his fastball is the pitch that they are probably going to have to develop. And it's one of the reasons he got hit hard, like I said, in 2022, and why they opted for more sliders. I think adding fastball ride, which is what Keener needs to do, I think they've had relative success of helping pitchers do that versus some other things. I think not that Ethan Katz will be working a ton with Keener right off the bat, but that's something that Dylan Cease struggled with early in his career, was adding good ride to his fastball. And then when he broke out, really his breakout was last year, but even 2021 when he was a lot better, he added a lot of fastball ride, and even Giolito too. And obviously Katz had a lot of hand in his development as well. So I've relative faith that they can do that. Now, if it's something where, like when they pick Jared Kelly, they're like, this guy needs to develop a breaking ball. He has no breaking ball. Well, Jared Kelly hasn't looked great because they haven't been able to develop a good breaking ball for him. So maybe that's a realm where you're like, if it was the opposite and Keener needed a good slider, then maybe it's a different story. But I think tweaking the fastball, I think, is something they can do.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, that alone is inspiring. Again, I don't necessarily look at it that way. We look at pitches as being equal, but apparently not. Okay, now clearly Seth Keener was a pretty intriguing pick. Obviously, it baffled me, so I guess that counts as intriguing. But the next thing I want to throw at you is maybe what of these 20 guys, or of the collegians, that you would have considered, Luke, to be the most intriguing pick. What guy that the White Sox have got, could be a low pick or not, sort of leaving you with a little intrigue?
So I'm going to go up one pick. I'm going to go to the 2nd round pick with Grant Taylor from LSU. And I think what's crazy about the LSU team that obviously went all the way to Omaha and won it all is that They had Paul Skeens, who went number 1. They had Ty Floyd, who was also a first-round pick. But they had a lot of pitchers that got hurt that could have also contributed, that got hurt both in the fall, like Grant. Well, I think Grant Taylor actually hurt himself in February right before the season, but guys that got hurt before the season. And when Taylor's picked, you're like, okay, it's a Tommy John guy. They're going to way underslot him. Mm-hmm. And then he signs for the slot value, and you're like, let's dig a little bit into it. And you're like, oh, this guy actually, had he not gotten hurt, was probably one of it was probably Paul Skeens, Ty Floyd, and Grant Taylor might have been their 3-man rotation there. And so Taylor, what we can see in the data is before he got hurt in the fall, he was showing some absolutely wicked stuff. And I'm sure that's what the White Sox noticed too. And they might have had a scout or two at some of his fall scrimmages. I don't know, but he showed some really good stuff. He's got a really good he's got a riding fastball with kind of the classic 12-6 curveball that play well off each other. And then he's got also a cutter and then a changeup. So, I mean, it's a 4-pitch mix that you haven't really seen him put it all together in a full collegiate season like he probably would have been, but he was on track to be really, he could have been a top half of the first round type of pick had he not gotten hurt. So it was definitely, you pick someone that is coming off a college season that didn't pitch at all, and you're kind of scratching your head. But I think the really high upside, low floor type of pick, and especially out of the first round, is the type of picks you like to see happen.
Do we know what his status is? Is he looking? Would he line up as like an extended spring training type of guy next year? Do you think he's ready to go in a regular spring training? Do we have any real update on what his actual recovery is at this point?
Yeah, so I believe he had surgery in either late February or early March. So if we go off the typical, like what we just heard from Liam Hendriks, the 12 to 14 month, it's probably an extended spring training type of deal. And so for him to be a high second round pick in for that timeline, I mean, it's got to somebody, whatever scout or if it was Kenny or Rick or Mike Shirley, whoever, somebody fell in love with what he was showing in the fall and in the preseason, that they're like, we need to pick this guy, and he wants slot value. We're going to give it to him because the upside is real.
Yeah. And it speaks, of course, to how much the White Sox want him and found they, sort of unearthed this gem who was, they were lucky to have fall, even though he didn't pitch. But it speaks, I presume, also to Grant's confidence that if he wasn't going to get, what he deserved, he wasn't just automatically jumping to the White Sox necessarily. It speaks to his own confidence, I presume, as well, that it's like, all right, you're going to give me, what's fair, or, we're not going to do this.
Right.
It's probably a promising sign.
And there could have been other teams that were like, oh, we'll get him in like the 9th or 10th round. We'll overslot him, and then we'll sign him away from LSU. And then the Sox are like, nope, we're going to give him that, what maybe you were going to overslot him later in the draft. We're just going to give it to him as the slot value in the second round. And, not let him either get back to LSU or get picked up later.
It's worth noting also that as there was a collective groan internally on staff at Southside Sox, Luke was quick to say, it didn't turn out to play out this way, but he was quick to say, okay, there's more to this story with this pick and it turned out that it would went a different direction than you even thought, because you were thinking more the underslot to pile up money somewhere down the draft, and the White Sox are really onto something, which also turned out to be true. But in the case of Taylor, he wasn't necessarily an underslot, but you were quick to say, hey, there does have to be a reason for this, and it might not have played out that way. Your faith might not have been rewarded, but as it turns out, it was in a way you weren't expecting. But again, credit due, you were preaching a little caution while I was rending my garments.
Well, then they pick Walkow, and you're like, okay, they're like, now it all makes sense, right? And they're going to way overslot him. It's going to be Grant Taylor's money. Then he signs for slot, and you're like, well, that money's got to be
get the money. Yeah. All right. We never necessarily want to do this, or certainly put you on the spot. So you're welcome to hedge this in whatever way you want it. It's fair. Obviously, our goal with the farm podcasts and, even when we're talking draft is never to, we're not going to bury anybody. We want everybody to do awesome. If they were still drafting people in the 50s, they're still drafting, Larry King's like godson. We'd be hoping that guy could be a star for the White Sox one day. So, with that as a caveat, I am curious to know, Luke, which of the picks you're just least excited about, or just sort of underwhelmed by? Maybe it's just opportunity that there were a lot of guys that you really would have had on your board that they went a different direction. It could even be that, not even necessarily diss on the guy, but who's the guy who's sort of most underwhelming to you?
Yeah, so I think this is always interesting, and you look at the rounds and the slot values of guys picked, and you're like, it seems like this guy that they got way later is a lot better than, like, why would he go here? What did they see? Was there an agreement before the draft? Like, how did this all work? And so the guy that I was kind of scratching my head on, there's really two guys. Calvin Harris, I think the fourth rounder from Ole Miss, the catcher, and then Riku Nishida, the second baseman from Oregon, who I believe was in the 11th round. Harris, I suppose, makes a little bit more sense now because they have acquired two catchers that look like they will stick behind the plate. Harris's bat is another guy who it's another left-handed bat who played at Ole Miss, played in College World Series. It performed really well. The bat looks really intriguing, aside from maybe some ground ball tendencies that you don't love. But when he's drafted and you don't have a lot of catching depth in the system, you're kind of looking like, well, we picked a catcher, but a lot of people don't think he's actually going to stick behind the plate. It's like a lesser version of when they drafted Zach Collins. Like, we really need a catcher, but there's a low probability that he sticks behind the plate. So maybe you get Harris now and you're like, okay, it's maybe try him a little bit first. He played outfield too at Ole Miss. You like the left-handed bat, DH. If the bat plays, then it's probably worth a fourth-round pick. With Nishida, and I should first off say that whoever scouted the Pac-12 for the White Sox has a lot on the line out of this draft, because they picked a lot of guys from the Pac-12, and so they either really trust this guy or he had really good reports. Or is Kenny Williams, isn't he a Stanford guy? So maybe it's a little Pac-12 bias there. So they picked Nishida from Oregon, who was a community college or JUCO transfer. Played a little second base, played a little right field. Real small guy, I think 5'6". But it just looks like it's the upside's maybe a utility player. And again, we're talking the 11th round, so we're nitpicking here. Yeah. If he turns out to be a utility player, that's probably
pretty good. Yeah,
probably great, right? But it's a really high ground ball rate. Doesn't hit the ball very hard based on the available data. And I think sometimes you just like to look at guys and be like, I just want upside, dart throw. Worst case scenario, he never makes it out of single A. Best case scenario, he's he's an everyday major leaguer. But I think what we saw in the later rounds is they were more comfortable taking guys with really high contact rates, control the strike zone, that maybe didn't hit the ball very hard, rather than vice versa, guys that mash the ball in college but have really extreme swing and miss issues that will probably perpetuate themselves even more as they get into pro ball. So I think from team to team, there's probably a little bit of a difference of opinion there on what they feel like they can develop more. Can we get this guy to hit the ball a little bit harder, maybe change some things in his swing to get to more power, hit the ball hard? But it looks like the Sox went in the direction of, maybe it's more innate to be able to just, hand-eye bat to ball. If we can get that already in-house and make some tweaks to hit the ball a bit harder, then that's the direction we want to go.
Yes. And it's a different direction, and we'll get to that in the second half for sure, because there's some trends in this draft that do seem to be decidedly non-White Soxian. That's for sure. All right. For the variety pack picks to kick this whole thing off, Luke, now what I would like to know from you is I guess we could adapt this into just most shocking pick, but what you feel was the most out of the box pick, I guess something that would not necessarily be expected by the White Sox in a typical draft. Who do you consider like the out of the box guy?
I don't know if I would out of the box. I think Zach Franklin from Missouri. Looks like he started a little bit. Looks like a more of a reliever though. He had a 7-something ERA at Missouri. He pitched 6 years of college baseball, which is after COVID is now possible. He pitched 5 years at Western Carolina, went for a 6th year at Missouri, went to the SEC and had a pretty tough year just based on results. His FIP was about 2 runs lower than his like 7.5 ERA. You pull up video on this guy, and it looks like he has one of the weirdest arm actions. It's like he's throwing a shot put on the mound. Very, I think the way I ended my blurb on him was that it's just a funky 10th round reliever is what it looks like. But he's got like really weird, the arm action produces really weird pitch movement. I think there's a lot of deception at play there, obviously from the arm action, but typically certain spin creates certain movement, and he's very off of that, and it's very interesting and weird movement profile. So I don't really know. When you take a guy like that, how you scout him and say this is our plan for him. It's almost like they saw him and were like, there's just a lot of weird stuff about this guy, and we're going to draft him, and we're going to see, like, let's get firsthand eyes on him and see what happens. So I think it was not that this goes against what they typically do, but it's speaking more to their confidence of we can take guys like this that are a little bit more obscure, and we can maybe rely on our player development a little bit more than we thought and get something out of this. But again, it's the 10th round. It's not the first or second round. So if he winds up in the bullpen in Chicago one day, it's a win.
Yeah. That's bold and brash to say the White Sox are going to try to lean more on their player development, because I'm not sure they've necessarily acquitted themselves too well over, I don't know how many years, but over, it seems like several years. Yeah. But hey, listen, if you're not confident, then you shouldn't be in the game. You shouldn't be drafting at all. You should just punt every pick. Okay, Luke, we're going to take a break. Come on back, talk about a few more picks, and maybe then get into a couple little big picture types of things, as long as you're willing to stay patient with me. We'll keep talking. Hey, everybody, hang with us for a minute. Fans First Sports Network has something to sell you. Please listen. Please click. Please, I don't know what they're selling. I hope it's not betting, but, whatever. Slap chop, some kind of spin mop. Consider it. It's probably a really, really good product. See you in a minute. Hey, White Sox fans. Can you believe this? 2 dugout metrics in a row, back to back. Not like a year later, not like months later, not like, hey, wait, is there a new manager? Is there a new editor at Southside Sox? No, this is like back-to-back dugout metrics. Of course, if you haven't listened, I don't know why you just pick up in the middle of a podcast. So go back and listen to the start. You'll get the whole etymology of how we got to where we are and how I'm just talking only to Luke Smailes. This is a first-time thing. I don't think we've ever done dugout metrics one-on-one. This analyst he's been exalted. We needed to get him back, as he's now explained. He did strike down the trade I tried to make just last podcast. He did exercise. I forgot I put that no trade clause in there. He exercised it, and he's back. And here's the thing: because I insulted him with that trade to get some pitching, it was reasonable thinking on my part. But because I insulted him, I had to bring him back for more money. I just listen. I'm sorry I blew the budget, Southside Sox faithful, but this is what you got to do. You got to bring a Luke Smailes back, especially because he was so close to the draft this year. His work has always been great for us. Continues to be super sharp. Great articles we've had on site breaking down the collegiate picks, which again is the bulk of the draft. We've gone through, I want to say 5 or 6 guys already. So we're going to pick up a few more that we don't want to miss before we maybe widen the scope out a little bit more and talk more broadly about the Sox. Let's wind up the upper half, or your first piece. And I guess we'll briefly touch on, because it really does, it seems like somewhat of a somewhat of a token pick, but that would be the 6th round lefty out of Texas. Tell me a little bit about this guy.
So yeah, Lucas Gordon it looks like a guy that should move pretty quick. He's stuck with the kind of trend that they went for. It was Power 5 and big time Power 5 players that had pitched or played in Omaha recently. So all these guys have big game experience. With Gordon, if I'm remembering correctly, it was fastball. I think changeup's his main secondary that gave right-handed hitters a lot of fits in the Big 12. And then he's got a kind of a gyro slider, which was one of the themes that the Sox definitely bought into. And so essentially the theory there is that it doesn't have a lot of big break, but it has a lot of sharp late break. And that's kind of been, the theory of seam shifted wake and that kind of new analytical way to analyze certain pitches. It looks like the Sox have definitely taken notice to that and have really have bought into that because 3 or 4 of the pitchers that they've drafted all exhibit those traits. So I think with Gordon, it's a guy that best case scenario, it's upper minors depth pretty quickly. And it's I think the way I describe him, like pitchability lefty that isn't going to light up a radar gun or have big break on pitches, but hopefully it's a guy that moves pretty quickly with some big time experience under his belt already.
Yeah, I'm slow and a little dopey. I think that's been demonstrated over the previous 8 dugout metrics, of which you've been part of 7, Luke. So you're familiar with what I'm about. But tell me if I'm wrong. Correct. You don't even have to gently correct me. But when I read about a guy, particularly who's had success in a power conference as well, but who's had really success maybe at any level, and one of the calling cards is, and again, these things usually work out. If you don't got the big fastball, you're going to have to develop changeup, stuff like that. So, I mean, part of it's born on necessity, but if you can pull it off, and coming into the professional ranks, you've got a changeup that you can consider a pretty good money pitch for you. That at least tells me, in addition to being a confident pitcher, that you sort of know, for the dumb way of saying it, you know how to pitch. I mean, is it a fair to say that this is a guy, and I guess you're speaking to it and saying he's a guy who can move quickly. This is a guy who does know what he's doing.
No, yeah. I think you're spot on there. It's there's not a whole lot of like grassroots development that you got to put towards a guy like this. It should be a pitcher that you're taking his current fastball, you're taking his current changeup, his current slider, and you're not bringing him in saying we gotta make some changes here. You got potential, but we gotta really make some changes. It's no, we're gonna maybe we'll send you to Winston-Salem, or we'll do a couple starts in Kannapolis and we'll send you to Winston-Salem, and then we're going to be aggressive with you to Birmingham because we think that your current arsenal is one that plays in the upper minors, and then it's kind of like, well, let's see how you do, and if we have to make changes, we'll make changes. But it's not a high school pick. Like I'll go back again to like the Jared Kelly pick, where he was a guy with a good velo on his fastball, elite changeup with no breaking ball that you have to really we need to teach you a slider, which the saying is you can't really teach. It's really hard to teach a guy how to spin a baseball. It's kind of like an innate skill. And so if you can't really do that, then it's tricky. So Gordon has some traits that, like the changeup, the fastball command, that you're like, okay, this is he reminds me of like the generic Cleveland Guardians pitcher that they just bring up, and you're like, he's throwing like 92 lefty, and he somehow is like 7 innings, 2 runs, and you're like, what just happened?
And they do it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
We do got to get some of that. So I guess can't beat them. Start drafting guys like that.
Yeah.
The guy I would have anticipated, not being in your mind, Luke, but the guy that I might have anticipated you picking as least exciting pick or most underwhelming, I want to ask you about next, because it's just strange to me that you are using an 8th round pick on a guy who seemingly has demonstrated pretty profound difficulty with breaking pitches. And so there's intrigue, and you've given us reason why the White Sox feel that can be offset. It still seems pretty bold. So maybe talk to me a little bit about what they are seeing that is worth sort of a hook and some promise to, in the 8th round. That's not enough in pick.
Right. Yeah. It's just Kenny Williams at Stanford. I get that's what I got to bring it back to, right?
Yeah, exactly. Of course.
He's like, Mike, you can do anything you want with the draft, but in the top 10 rounds, we need a Stanford Cardinal. And whatever you do, it's fine. No, no. With Eddie Park, it's a guy who played center field. Again, another Omaha guy played in Omaha, Stanford. Has actually been in Omaha the past 2 years, so he has a lot of big time experience. I think with him, it's different than Nishida. They have similar offensive profiles, but what Park does better is A, he plays a premium position. He should be able to play center field. B, is he's a lot better. I reference a lot in the piece's sweet spot percentage, and essentially that's how often with your batted balls do you hit it between that 8-degree and 32-degree launch angle. That's essentially the optimal launch angle that you want to hit the ball at. So you look at a guy like Luis Ariz, who's like the king of sweet spot percentage, because he doesn't hit the ball that hard, but he's really good at the line drive right over the infield, right? And then Freddie Freeman is the other extreme where he's got more power, but he's also really efficient to do that. When the Sox drafted Nick Madrigal 4th overall, he had this innate ability to hit his line drives at an efficient sweet spot percentage. Obviously, other stuff transpired with him, and he wasn't able to stay healthy, and he wasn't the defender and base runner, and he's the 4th overall pick, for crying out loud. But Eddie Park in the 8th round. It's best case scenario, maybe he's a 4th outfielder that kind of is a spray line drive guy, another left-handed hitter that gets on base a lot. And it's back to that theme of they wanted guys that made a lot of contact, and whether they're going to take Eddie Park and say, we think you're a high probability guy to just make it to the major leagues, or if they're going to take Eddie Park and say, we're going to be aggressive with some changes. We're going to really try to get you to hit the ball harder. That's left to be seen, but you always just look for a trade or two that you're like, okay, that might be able to carry them. If everything clicks,
yeah,
this is something that you like. What you don't want is there's nothing really there that intrigues you, or you could guess that is what intrigued the White Sox. So there's some stuff there with Eddie Park.
Yeah, providing there's a trait that's beyond just being a Stanford Cardinal. Yeah, I mean, you want a little bit more than just that. Even Ken Williams, I think, might be more than that. Three pitch mix for a 9th rounder in Jake Peppers is something you brought out as being a reason to maybe have a little bit of intrigue and maybe even a little bit of hope in that. This is a guy, I'm not going to just say it's exactly like, say, a Lucas Gordon or whatever, but a guy that, there's something there, there's a foundation there, and whether it goes in the direction of starter or reliever, it does seem like there's a pitcher there that can at least give you some good organizational starts. If not, who knows, as a wild card surprise.
Yeah, so it's another mid-major arm. He kind of went back and forth between starting and relieving, so you wonder, is this a guy they're going to try to get the most of as a starter, or is it somebody they try to fast track as a reliever? He's got a mid-90s fastball, but the star of the show is the slider. It had the 6th best whiff rate of any slider in Division I baseball. And
that's pretty good.
That's good, right? So it's the same. It's that gyro slider. It's not it's not the sweeper, the new pitch type. It's the sharp, almost looks like a cutter. But it's the idea there is late break, sharp late break. So, as always, anything you can get this late in the draft is good. But there's the upside that his slider, and maybe they say, hey, Jake, you're going to throw your slider 50-60% of the time, and we're going to bring you on as a reliever. But it's back to this. You're buying into this seam shift awake philosophy that they feel that they can develop and make the most out of. So, Peppers is intriguing, and you pull up his data and you're like, whoa, that slider is real. So then you ask, well, why did he fall this late? It's a lot of success at a mid-major. There's some control questions. So nothing perfect this late, but there's something there that's a very loud tool. So it's kind of the opposite of the Eddie Park deal there, right? Like this is the loud, very low floor, very high upside.
Yeah, guys you can up talk. You just want guys you can up talk, and another team may see something very differently, and that's why they didn't pick them. So it makes sense. All right, listen. When I read your second piece, I mean, it's the even though we know what the odds are for the guys who are, I mean, Lord knows when there was a 40-round draft, but even now at this point, you're getting into the double figure rounds. It's like, okay, come on, that's a long shot. And sure, we get the Danny Mendick and all that, and the White Sox. I don't know that they've had more success than most. I don't know if that speaks well to the White Sox or not. But I mean, there are guys who do struggle their way upwards, swim against the current, and make an impact, even if it just is at AAA, much less the majors. So it's not to throw all these guys away. And as a result, again, a simple mind like myself, or a person who just wants a heroic story, always wants to sort of latch onto a guy in one of those around and say, "Oh my God, this is going to be the guy. This guy's really going to move." And I got to say that when I read the write-up of 13th rounder Ryan Galani. I got to say, I'm sort of excited. It really seems like the White Sox, not a guy from Stanford, tripped over a guy who could make some noise. He seems like he's coiled for to maybe surprise people. I mean, I could also just disappear, but could really surprise some people.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they had a couple of these picks where it was really loud production at mid majors that have some peripheral red flags that, whether it be like Delaney, he put up huge numbers at Wofford. He was a third baseman originally that had to move to first base. I don't know if that was purely because they had a better third baseman or if he struggled over there quite a bit, but it was more than likely a first baseman who put up loud numbers, but there's some ground ball tendencies there that you're not thrilled with. You like to see guys that were able to pull the ball in the air well, and God knows that's been a problem for the current team. The best example of that is someone like Eloy Jimenez, who has this prodigious raw power, but he tends to, when he pulls the ball, just beats the ball into the ground. So you get to a right-handed power hitter, a ground balls to shortstop are the most agonizing thing to watch. So you try to steer them away, but sometimes it's just kind of ingrained in the fabric of their swing, and you can't tweak it. But Delaney, I think it's just draft it and see how much of this is real and can continue. So it looks like he's already started playing in the Arizona complex games along with some of these picks, and so we'll just kind of see how transferable some of this, really loud mid-major production was, and how it can translate to pro ball. But I think it was a top 50 WRC plus. So I mean, that's
not bad.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, as much as you can say, listen, production at complex league or low A, none of them. Okay, big numbers, that doesn't matter. Well, the bottom line is you roll the ball out and you see what happens, and it doesn't really matter what your draft grades are. If you're not producing, then you're not a good player. You're not going to be in the pros for very long. And the reverse is, if you're Ryan Galani and he's like unheralded, but then he produces, this is a guy that we're going to just we're going to latch on to. We're contractually obligated. At this point, the White Sox just play into my hands. Every year, they're drafting at least one horned frog. And of course, therefore, we're going to have to talk about that guy. And the good news is, Luke, I'm not forcing you to talk about our 20th rounder, potential late inning arm closer for the Horned Frogs, and a guy that you see as, and I think maybe resembling a couple of the other Horned Frog picks the White Sox have made in the past. Godspeed, Evan Scout. Of course, you're not one of those late inning options. You're a catcher who's not an organization any longer. But we're talking about a guy who could, another one of those guys who could maybe move quickly. I don't know if he's quite equivalent to like a Tristan Stevers, who was picked higher last year, but a guy who had a lot of closing experience and, is I believe Double A now. So tell me about my man Wright.
Yeah, so I think that's a pretty good comp. Stevers, who, like you said, he's already up to Double A, and I think that might be, just a guess, that might be the plan for Wright. And being the 20th rounder is kind of the last guy I profiled, and you can kind of see the the guy's kind of, tailing off, and there's less and less that maybe you like. And then you're like, whoa, Garrett, right? I mean, here's a closer on a team that a really good program, TCU, that was just in Omaha. And I mean, he's pitching against Florida and striking, Florida Gators out, and first round picks. So he's really intriguing. He's got a really, really good slider. And when he got to Omaha, he started throwing his slider a lot more, and it performed really well. So I was surprised that, and this is kind of getting back to what I was talking about, is like, how is this guy still available in the 20th round? Was there thought that he was going to go back to TCU? What was the deal there? Are people looking more for just guys that can start? If it's surefire reliever, is that not what teams are looking for? What was and I'm like, is he hurt? Did he hurt himself at the end of the year? No. I'm like, okay, well, and then I was reading a little more about him, and that he was a little ticked off by like the 15th round that he wasn't drafted. So he like turned his TV off and went to go work out. And then somebody texted him like, hey dude, the Sox just picked you in the 20th round. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. So,
still angry though. Still angry.
Yeah. So, but I think, like, comparing him to Stivers, I think you draft him. I don't know if he had a decent workload pitching all the way through June this year in college. So maybe you're a little careful with him this year, but next year you're like, hey, we're going to send you to Winston-Salem, and then you're going to be hopefully quick to Birmingham, and let's see if we can get you in the major league pen by 25 if everything works out perfectly, right? So it looks like a fastball slider combination that you kind of just let it play. It's got good mid 90s that's peaked in the upper 90s velo. It's a slider that had whiff rates that at times were over 50%. It's a two pitch mix, so there's not, you're not going to try to transition him to a starter, but it's just, let's see if the fastball slider combo, just kind of let it eat and see if it can take you all the way to the big leagues.
And Garrett, good news. Southside Sox, the prominent voice of White Sox coverage. Let's face it, we don't really even pay attention to any of the others. I mean, let's just be straight. Is extremely Horned Frog friendly. So I mean, come on, things are looking up. You got drafted, you signed, you'll be in the system, and come on, Southside Sox got your back. Okay, you didn't profile him. He's obviously probably the name of the whole draft. I just want to get some thoughts on the excitement you felt as unofficially or officially a White Sox fan. Not sure how we should brand you at this point, but of the White Sox, sort of like, I mean, they did this a little with Jared Kelly when it's a guy that was, rumored to be basically a Garrett Crochet level talent, ends up falling in the second round, and somehow the White Sox are the team that ends up being the one who like works the deal, says, yeah, we're going to take you, a first round talent, in the second round. George Walcall falling to the seventh round because it's presumed, he's going to honor his commitment to, I think, South Carolina. He's going to honor his college commitment. Huge thumper. Unlike even Jared Kelly, a guy who apparently dreamed of playing for the White Sox. Somehow that message got out there. White Sox were aware. It was out there in the air, and they said, okay, we're going to make this happen. I mean, that was something none of us, I don't think any of us were expecting. And what a pleasant surprise to see those kind of coups. The Jared Kelly was sort of cool enough because you just don't ever feel you see the White Sox pulling that kind of stuff. Certainly not in the free market of free agency. That certainly doesn't seem to ever happen. But in the draft, super cool. And it's just got to be exciting to see that kind of like maneuvering to bring in a guy who, I mean, we're talking about, potential real marquee talent.
Yeah. And you hope that, it's a 6'7" or whatever, a huge left-handed bat. And you can dream on that quite a bit. So you hope that, they've taken a couple swings at some high school guys later, and none of them have really panned out. So you hope that this time can be different. But having a commitment to South Carolina, and they've produced some, just this past year, they had a really good offense. They produced some really good hitters. And in the SEC, the level of play in the SEC right now is absolutely incredible. So to turn that down and having experience to go play down there and obviously get a lot better, and potentially for a guy like that, that could be an easy first round pick So it kind of speaks to what you said. He wants to be he wanted to play for the White Sox and, kind of a local guy, and he's putting his faith in their player development system to get him where he wants to go versus going to, have the college experience down in the SEC and also play, incredibly high level baseball down there. So it's what the good organizations do. They work out deals like this and they snag guys with good commitments at overslot values. So hopefully everything comes to fruition and he's a year or two from now, we're like, man, that was a steal.
Yeah, like that could very well could look at it like that changed everything at a low ebb for the organization itself. This is where it started to turn around. We don't know it now, but boy, we can dream that even a year from now, we're starting to feel that way. As he may raise the entire organization because.
Even if he's not a superstar, that he's 6'7" outfielder, always the next Aaron Judge, right? Like even if he's not that, if he gets into pro ball and he's doing well and he gets to maybe Double-A in 2-3 years from now, that the Sox have a decent major league team. Well, that's a guy you could maybe move in a trade. Like talk about like things that have held back this organization when they were trying to compete in 2020 and 21, where they didn't have a lot of guys to trade to make the big over the top move. Yeah. And when you don't have that kind of depth either, that's when you're spending on the, you don't have major league quality relievers to bring up. You're signing Joe Kelly, you're signing Kendall Graveman, you're giving a 3-year deal to Larry Garcia because you can't produce an internal utility player, right? So, not only do we hope these guys, make it big and do some really good things for the White Sox on their own, but maybe it's just give off the illusion that you have a little bit of organizational prospect depth and be able to make some moves and maneuver guys around. And then, that's ultimately, building from the ground up, how you build a good organization. I think it's been a very underrated issue with the things that have transpired here in the past year and a half is not having a strong foundational farm system to pull from.
Yeah. And maybe even a more minor aspect of that, but it does loom pretty big, is White Sox don't seem to have a problem getting guys, well, that might be an overstatement, but getting guys to the majors. The problem is they all are sort of there. Jake Berger's certainly breaking out, but even he's not just like an understood, superstar. And of course, they traded him. But you don't have that guy who, you don't have Andrew Vaughn becoming like superstar level. You didn't have Nick Madrigal, getting at that. You do need. It's great to have 8 guys from your draft classes on your major league roster, homegrown. You need one of them to be like, wow. I guess Luis Roberts sort of counts as that guy, but you need that sort of breakout ability too. So, no pressure, George, but good to have you with us. Glad you're going gangbusters already. You're in the ACL, so let's rock it.
But even think about like guys that just got in trades, like Jake Yeager. What was he, a 4th round pick of the Marlins? Mm-hmm. Nastrini from the Dodgers. I think he was 3rd or 4th round. Mm-hmm. So. Forget like past the 5th round. Can we get some guys that turn into at least something interesting in rounds 2 through 5 that maybe we can move? Like you think of the good orgs like Tampa, Cleveland, the Dodgers. They always have a 3rd round pick who's like, how did they where do they find this guy, and B, how is he available for them at the end of the 3rd round? So. The quicker they can start doing that, it changes so many things. It has such a domino effect.
Yeah, so nobody breaks their arms, pat themselves on the back. We just did the day in White Sox history. I think it was August 2nd, I want to say. Not just Frank Thomas's debut, but the guy they drafted in the 1st round the year later, Alex Fernandez's debut on the same day. And these are guys who contributed 90 WAR to the White Sox. Okay, that's a fluke, but it's also not impossible. So, how about a little bit more of that, White Sox? Right. Let's turn the 4th round guy they traded for into a guy who gives you 20 WAR in your organization. Right. Okay, come on, White Sox. We're feeling good about you. All right, trends. We're going to talk a little about trends, and I'm so smart that I've decided to identify a couple, so you can tell me that they're wrong, they're dumb, and then I will erase this little slide I came up with. But it does seem to me like very obviously something that is pretty gravely lacking, and I don't even know how important it is, so you can correct me, because when I do the minor league updates, I'm always looking at when I'm trying to pick the cold cats of the game. I'm looking at the guys who are striking out, 3 times. I understand an out's an out, and if a guy hits a homer with 3 strikeouts, we're supposed to be happy with that. So I'm not going to be too garrulous and old school about it. But the White Sox clearly, at the major league level, it seems like at every level sort of have a contact issue. And I know contact is, I don't know if it's overrated or not. I guess it seems like it's gone by the wayside because people are taking big swings with launch angle to get the ball over the fence. It really doesn't matter how you make outs, but it does seem like the White Sox very distinctively took a turn toward trying to get guys who had a strikeout and walk ratio that was getting pretty close to one. It seemed to be pretty obvious. So it wasn't just like they backed into those guys. And I think, as you've alluded, College World Series experience, championship experience. Really, I think at least 3 of the guys have won college rings.
Yeah.
Those seem to be 2. Do those make sense? And is there something else I'm missing in terms of draft trends for 2023?
No, those definitely makes sense. And to add a list, it might just be left-handed hitters too. Like they put a premium on left-handed hitters. But yeah, the strikeout to walk ratio, and I think more just like drawing walks, I think is I mean, you talked a little bit about Andrew Vaughn. Like that's been one of the biggest disappointments. Is this guy was supposed to be, close to 400 on base percentage at his peak, and he's really struggled. I think in his last, maybe in July he had like a 2% walk rate or some crazy low number. But yeah, I think that they feel that they can develop the guy a little bit better that comes in with the good contact skills. And kind of like what I said before, it's, do you try to make a big swing change to get him to more power, or do you just say, maybe just the contact rate can get you there? So I think it's definitely at the major league level, it's been a huge problem, just not drawing walks, not getting on base. But the contact rate's great, but if it's bad contact, then it's not going to do a whole lot for you. If it's a lot of, it's been another thing too. It's especially last year, it was like, this team's not striking out. What's going on? So they lead the league in ground ball rate and they don't walk. So that's when you have like 12 hits and 10 singles and 2 runs because you just need that one. You need that one ball in the gap, that one home run, or in some cases we just need a sac fly, but you hit a double play ball in the infield. So I think there's a premium on that, but I think maybe less on the strikeout side of that ratio and more we need guys that are going to draw walks.
Yeah. White Sox in Thursday's game. I tuned into the game, 7 hits. Wow, man, this is great. They got a few runs. What's going on? Oh, no, 7 singles. Okay. Well, I mean, better to have that than 7 outs, of course. We don't want to be no hit, but yeah, come on, White Sox. Okay. Let's even talking well before the draft on one of the farm podcasts with Darren Black, he seemed pretty. We were sort of doing a whole organization assessment. I think my question kept being to Darren, why can't we be the Tampa Rays? And he was trying to actually answer my question politely because it's just a rude and belligerent question. But I mean, he was even quick to identify as the season was just getting started that there was some promise in this first Mike Shirley draft. It seems certainly like we're coming away, way early, that there's some good feelings about this one. Let's just talk a little bit about, there has been a little change of direction. I think mostly trending good, but what's your assessment about how they've done a couple drafts under his belt, I guess?
Yeah, so just doing a quick review on how the guys are doing that they picked last year. I mean, some of these guys, they're tearing up A-ball between Kannapolis and Winston-Salem. There's some pretty loud numbers. I mean, you look at like Jacob Burke in the 11th round, who's done fantastic. Couple relievers we mentioned, Stiver's already being in Birmingham. Eric Adler looks pretty nasty as well. Another Wake Forest guy they got in the 6th round. Paulette, I think, was a really interesting guy they drafted, the 2nd rounder from Arkansas. I think the intriguing thing from him is he's just getting some innings under his belt after he got hurt. He looks like he's healthy. Yeah. So hopefully he continues to grow. But you just go guy by guy, and I think Elko's been pretty popular based on what he did. The kind of player he was in Ole Miss and how crucial he was to them winning a championship. But then he's put up some pretty loud numbers, and that's a guy who's you kind of question, like, does the swing and miss nearing 30% in the lower levels, will that end up disqualifying him from ever making a true impact in the upper minors and ultimately major league level? But I mean, he's putting up like a 150 WRC plus as he's moved up a level now. So a guy you probably will see in Birmingham and Charlotte in the not too distant future. But just, they had some community college guys, they had some mid-major guys, and you go guy by guy, and you're like, well, he's got a FIP in the threes. He's 120 WRC plus. So it looks like and again, early returns, you can do as well as you want in high A, but you start doing it in double A and you're like, okay, this is really interesting. So I think the last couple months of this year, and then we go into next year, if these guys continue this trend up, I think Mike Shirley deserves a lot of credit. So the early returns, like you said, are very positive.
Yeah, and it's tempting to still look at the organizations. Let's face it, the organization, and I know it's not about win-loss records, but it's not about win-loss records either. When you look at that, you say, wow, this is still just a terrible organization. I know it still isn't grayed out terribly well by all the experts out there. But, I mean, we're talking about a class who's only had now a small impact on that, relatively small impact. We're just, talking about one class of guys. Even if you count the undrafteds, that's maybe one team's worth of guys when we're talking about, 5-team organization, and that's probably overstating it. So the effect is going to take some time to see how the rest of the season plays, see how they start out next season. And, these guys continue to push it. I mean, Burke, I remember last year, was a guy who just seemed to jump out. I was like, wow, this is really not for a double figure round pick. This is interesting. I'm glad that for once when I have a smart thought about a player that they actually, come through a little bit. But yeah, he's really been pretty dynamic. And Elko seems like he was being held down for so long, everybody was just clamoring for him to move up. And it seems like almost the White Sox were aware of, all right, let's not push him too hard, because then suddenly the strikeout rate is going to blow up to 50% or something. But
right.
So far so good. It hasn't happened. So I mean, geez, maybe he's got an extra gear that maybe he didn't even show in college.
And he's an older guy too, and it's not like you're waiting for a ton of defensive development either with Tim Elko. So it's kind of like, let's see what we got here. Let's see if because if he can stay upper 20s nearing 30 and he's hitting for power, maybe there's something there. I mean, that's where you're in kind of the Jake Berger mold there, right? But if you get up 30 and you're 35, high 30s, then it's like your power production has to be so large then that to outweigh the lack of contact. So for where he was drafted and how old he is, I think, why not be a little bit more aggressive?
It's a coin flip, but I'm going to put you on the spot for the 2024 draft. I know. Why are we talking about 24 draft? Well, because I'm asking about it. Okay, will the White Sox pick, among their 20 picks, will they pick an Ole Miss player next year or not?
I don't know if they'll pick an Ole Miss player. I think the player that I just from watching a lot of college baseball and the College World Series this past year, Jack Caglione from Florida will likely be a top 5 pick player, and I'm sure the Sox will fit squarely right in those top 5. So he has a shot to be, at least at Florida. He's a two-way player. He is a first baseman, but it's a very interesting profile to me. It's a lefty that's been up in the upper 90s, and to me, I look at him and people are gonna, he's a college Ohtani, but I think he could be like a closer type. I think this is an interesting adaptation from an Ohtani, like a guy that can play first base every day, but then comes in the end of the game and is a relief pitcher. Like I think that would be interesting as a kind of a less extreme version of Ohtani. So I wonder, and now he might come back at Florida this year and have greatly improved command, and he'll be the number one there at Florida, and maybe he's the surefire number 1 overall pick to Oakland or whoever, and he's going to try to start and be the DH. But I think for the 24 draft, it'll be interesting to kind of do they pivot back to a Colson Montgomery high school type, or are they going to stick with the college hitter? Do they? I'm sure a lot has to do with, if they're kind of tanking it through the first half of the season. By next year's draft, maybe they're as they get ready for a tear down, maybe they're like, well, we'll pick a high school player with higher upside. But if they're good and they see a hole, maybe they want to take a college arm to supplement the rotation a little bit quicker. So I think a lot the next calendar year of baseball probably have a lot to do with their strategy there.
If Ken Williams, whether he's even with the organization any longer, if he still has Jerry Reinsdorf's phone number and they are competing at the first half of next year, that they are going to pick a guy that can get into the majors as soon as possible, because that's always what they've done. But for those draftniks out there, are always like, geez, the White Sox. I mean, it hasn't really been the case. They had a third and a fourth pick. They've had an eighth pick in recent years. But oh man, we never get to talk about any of those big names. Well, careful what you ask for, because we're going to be in that discussion next year, because this is a lousy team, and it's not going to get any better for the last 2 months. Hey, Luke, we talked for now. It's just hit an hour, and you did mention him, but we haven't talked about Joe Kelly yet. Oh my gosh, we're just gonna have to table it for the next 5. Oh yeah, I noticed you went to LA, and he just basically became the pitcher you've been telling me for 2 years he is. And I understand, we have our disagreements about him, but he's his arm's back. He's got a defense behind him. I imagine that's good.
Well, I think right at the end before he was traded, I think we landed on at least for me, I thought we landed on a good common ground. And you said he's been disappointing, and then I thought about it. I'm like, that's actually, I think, a good, like, he has been disappointing, but I still think he was I think he performed well given the stuff that Joe Kelly can control. Ultimately, it's a flawed strategy having to bring in a guy like Joe Kelly and Kendall Graveman and spend the money in the bullpen. It's not a position you want to be in, and it's a flawed concept to begin with. And I think it's surprising, because it happened to the Astros with Rafael Montero, and then they kind of doubled down and just traded for Kelly. And I think not Kelly, they traded for Graveman. I think Rick Howell's probably like, okay, you sure? Yeah, we'll take this catching prospect back. You do realize that Kendall Graveman's due $9 million
doesn't end this year.
Yeah. He's not a pending free agent. Okay. Yep. Yeah. No trade back. See you later.
Yeah, right. I got him again. Yeah. Well, Rick, he's those are a whole other series of podcasts, and we've had those podcasts before, and we probably will again. Welcome back, Luke. It is good to be doing Dugout Metrics again with you, with the other guys. Let's maybe have all 4 of us get together. I don't know. It's simple. I'm not really sure what the point is going to be. It's going to be a really rough end of season, but maybe it's to talk about some of the White Sox players who are brought. Maybe Lenyn Sosa will actually get to play for the White Sox this year, for example. But we'll see how this season plays out, and hopefully we won't be doing, unfortunately, our second to last podcast, not the one that just ran yesterday, was a playoff preview. Unfortunately, we won't be doing Dugout Metrics playoff previews probably anytime soon. I guess maybe as soon as next year, but definitely not this year. So we won't have that excuse, but hopefully we'll find an excuse to get together and talk about some of the stuff we've done for the first 8 of these. Thank you for all the insight on the draft. Really cool having you on the ground there. Of course, not on our behalf, but it's nice to have you there and to sort of vicariously live through you, like, oh my gosh, he's right there at the draft. That's so cool. But great work there, and thank you for the articles written, some real insight, and hopefully this podcast has helped sort of activate and illuminate some of the thoughts that you just typed down in a paragraph or two, and people have even a greater understanding of what looks like a sort of solid, diverse, promising class. Let's hope in a year when we talk again, Luke, we'll be able to say, man, look how right I was in these guys. I was feeling good, and now I'm feeling even better. And I'll say, oh, yeah, I was too. Yeah, I was too. And, you can call me out for lying. That's fine. But, yeah, let's do it again soon, whatever soon means. But how about let's have soon be sooner than a year and a half from now?
Yeah, and hopefully, like you said, hopefully we can talk about maybe Sosa, someone like Rodriguez, maybe Colas shows some potential that gives you some excitement for next year. But ultimately, I think as we get into our off-season plans that I always enjoy doing every year, I think this year could be particularly interesting because I think we'll have one extreme to the other in terms of directions that people want to take this team. So they might be an interesting project for some people, and I think a lot of interesting reads on where people think the organization should go after this year. So we'll see how much the rest of the season kind of signals if there's anything else to take away from this season. But yeah, it's great to be back, and hopefully we can do a couple more with Malachi and Trevor.
Yeah, at the very least, yes, we'll get everybody to talk about what their direction and what their plans be. I can speak for Malachi. I think he's like, hey, this is a 500 division winning, 500 record to be a division winner this year. projecting to next year, why are you going to shuffle it up too much? I think that would be his stance of sort of going for it a little bit. I'm not sure what Trevor will have to say, but yeah, maybe at the very least we'll all get together for off-season plans. We're looking forward to off-season plans. So we will do it soon. Dugout Metrics is back again. Cost us an extra coin, but he's back with us. Luke Smailes, and it's worth it. So thanks for this hour with us. Thanks everybody for listening, paying attention. We got to get excited about something. So let's get excited about the draft. Some of these guys are in the system already. George Wolkow to tonight, as we're speaking, got his first professional hit. So hey, things are looking up. Let's go, $1 Million Man. Make your way up, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, Luke. Thanks, everybody, for listening and watching all that stuff. And I don't know when Dugout Metrics is coming back, but I can promise it'll be more than a year and a half from now. So stay tuned. Hang on the edge of your seat for the next Dugout Metrics coming sooner. Well, maybe not sooner than you expect, but
I got my long-term contract signed, so we're
exactly. He has to show up. All right. Just as we're sending Trevor off on a bit of vacation, Luke is back for every other day. Okay, so see you in a couple days on the next Dugout Metrics.